So by now, you've probably heard all over the internet that the US is heading towards a recession. And with more and more people talking about it, this prediction feels unfortunately more and more looming. But this video isn't about whether or not there'll be a recession. This video is about what comes after. Now, in the past, following a recession, the US has always been able to bounce back. However, a main reason for this was because China, as their main adversary, was not as strong globally, politically, and economically as they are right now. I think this photo alone of the same train driver taken 26 years apart should sum up how far and quickly China has risen during this time. And one thing I've noticed is this time the government in China has been slowly crafting a plan in which, if it works the way they want it to, will make it almost impossible for the American economy to bounce back like they've always done so in the past. Let me explain.
I do not think U.S. policy is fully come to grips with the nature of the challenge and how far along China is in playing that game.
This is David Autor, an American economist as well as professor of economics at MIT, and he's been interviewed quite a lot in the past few months, where he makes a very big claim.
The China they think they're competing with is the China that overran U.S. in furniture manufacturing and toys and assembly of electronics 20 years ago. But that's really not the battle that we're facing now.
In the interview, he's talking about why a China Shock 2.0 is coming. Now, if you aren't familiar with what the China Shock is and what the first one was, this is essentially what it was in a nutshell. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, also known as the WTO, and became equivalent to having the most favored nation status, with all the other countries a part of the WTO around the world. Most favored nation status means that a country treats all its trading partners equally by granting the same trade benefits, such as having low to no tariffs. And keep that in mind, because I'll get into that soon. Anyway, in the first China shock, America lost a huge number of low-skilled manufacturing jobs, and a rough estimation of the amount of jobs lost, according to current Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, is 3.7 million, and these were jobs making things like clothes, furniture, toys, appliances, etc. And so instead of made in USA, many products became made in China and shipped from across the ocean. What Americans got in return, however, was overall cheaper priced goods. Now, looking back holistically, this was a blessing in disguise for America's economy, since it pushed the US to grow in other areas, that being the information technology and service sector. Still, the damage to certain places was really bad. Like a lot of small town blue collar communities saw good steady jobs disappear over the span of less than a decade.
Every single employee of this plant will be out of work by January.
And those who felt the wave of unemployment the most were often middle-aged white men without college degrees in southern red states. Working in a factory was essentially their ticket to a decent living. And when those jobs moved overseas, it hurt them not just economically, but also politically. And going on a tangent, this discontent later fed into movements that helped fuel the rise of Donald Trump. Now, that being said, the key takeaway here is that while America lost manufacturing jobs, it did gain new ones in other sectors, and overall, the economy still grew through strength in technology, finance, aerospace, and other high-end industries, and arguably better than if the China shock had not occurred. So anyway, David Autor recently warned the US that a China Shock 2.0 could be on the horizon, but this time it's not about cheap factory jobs and toaster assembly lines. Rather, it's about China moving in on those exact industries at the very top of the value chain. Things like semiconductors, airplane manufacturing, electric vehicles, and AI. And if America were to lose its edge in these areas, the damage would be far worse than the first China shock, because these industries are where the real money and global power lies. So this plan from China pretty much started a decade ago. In 2015, they rolled out Made in China 2025, a bold plan to move the country's manufacturing industry up the value chain. You may remember me mentioning it very briefly in my past video here. Instead of pumping out cheap toys and t-shirts, they wanted to dominate advanced industries, those that were held by the US. And how were they going to do it? By pouring money in. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in state-backed funds, subsidies, and tax breaks. Just last year, they launched their third semiconductor fund worth nearly $50 billion to push self-sufficiency and cut dependence on US tech. And so China set market share targets where 80 to 90% of domestic sales must come from Chinese firms. What this means is that they're building vertically integrated companies in industries where even America's most valuable company, Nvidia, still rely on outside manufacturers like TSMC in Taiwan, who then rely on a Dutch company, ASML, for their machines. Like, China wants to keep pretty much the entire supply chain within the country. Now, you might think that's never going to work. And from 2003 to 2007, the US led in 60 of 64 critical technologies. China, just 3. Fast forward to today, however, the US leads in only 7, and China now dominates 57 out of the 64. That includes radar, advanced aircraft engines, drones, and satellites, with many direct military uses. For instance, look at advanced aircraft engines. They're filing over 70% of the world's patents each year, and in total patents, they've already surpassed the US. And what this ultimately means is that though let's be honest, when the recession comes, it's going to make it all that harder, if not impossible, to bounce back economically, especially considering how the US debt has surpassed its GDP. And yes, if you know anything about economics, I agree with you. Measuring economic activity via GDP is considered bad because it fails to account for human factors like quality of life, work-life balance, and societal well-being. But as an Australian, all I can say is, personally, I feel like the quality of life is better here, despite the fact our GDP per capita is more than $20,000 less than the US. For the simple reason being, our government believes that access to healthcare is a basic human right, unlike yours.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.
Anyway, sorry, I went on a tangent again. But not to be too pessimistic, when this recession hits, if coupled with a second China shock, it genuinely could spark another Great Depression. And this isn't like some sort of secret, I'm definitely not the first person to make this claim online. Unfortunately, something else that's probably also not a secret, however, is your so-called private online emails. Did you know that big providers like Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo can actually peek into your messages? I think we tend to imagine emails as sealed envelopes that only us and the recipient can read, but in reality, they're more like postcards that the whole post office can glance at. I didn't realize how exposed my inbox was, and honestly, it kind of pissed me off. If you're feeling the same way right now, don't worry, there is a fix. ProtonMail is the world's leading private email service, built in Switzerland and trusted by over 100 million people worldwide, including journalists, activists, and security pros. And sure, you're probably not on the level of sending emails covering up the Epstein list type scandals, but your messages still deserve privacy. Why should tech giants get to read into your personal life just so they can sell you ads you're more likely to click on? ProtonMail was created with one core belief: privacy is a basic human right, and unlike those other companies, they don't make money off your data. With ProtonMail, only you can read your emails. No ads, no trackers, no spying. And best of all, it's totally free. Switching is easy, and honestly, why wouldn't you? Especially if you care about your privacy and don't want to be someone else's product. Give ProtonMail a try, totally free, by using my link in the description below. Big thanks to ProtonMail for sponsoring this video. Now, back to where we left off. Perhaps you might be thinking that maybe if the US stops importing from China, that could stifle their progress. And to an extent, that seems to be the goal of the tariffs. But a key part of China's strategy is this shifting of trading partners. As the strategist Sun Tzu once said, don't depend on the enemy not coming. Depend on being ready for him. China isn't betting on being friends and begging to trade with America. Rather, it's building a future where they don't even have to ask. Just 25 years ago, 42% of China's exports went to the US. By 2023, that number had fallen to just 13%. And the shift is easy to see. This visualization from the Lowy Institute says it all. Blue shows countries where the US is the top trading partner, and red shows China. Instead of selling the majority of their products to the US, China is now everywhere. Southeast Asia, Europe, South America, South Africa, and the Middle East. Asian countries alone have overtaken the US as China's top buyer, and China achieved this through the help of the Belt and Road Initiative. Since 2013, China has poured over $1 trillion into things like railways in Laos, ports in Sri Lanka, highways in Kenya, power plants in Pakistan, mega projects that stitch it closer to new partners. At first, the West criticized it as being too ambitious and too expensive. But a decade later, more than 140 countries are on board, representing 75% of the world's population. But the true purpose of the Belt and Road Initiative is about influence. By building essential infrastructure where Western money was absent, China locked itself into the economic lifelines of these countries. The payoff, you might be wondering? Loyal trading partners, steady demand for Chinese goods, and most importantly, less dependency China as well as other countries have on the US. Now, I want to talk about Trump because Trump's actions have not been something, in my opinion, China has expected. It's actually been a catalyst to help China speed up their plans even more. And what I mean by this is that China's current strategy that I mentioned just now has an Achilles heel. And what I mean by that is that if all the countries ultimately choose the US over China, all of it will fall apart. And with that being said, There's an article I read recently, which I'll link in the description, called "Trump is a gift that keeps on giving to China." And it just lists out all the reasons Trump has made it more favorable for countries to ally themselves with China over the US. For instance, in the article, on the topic of India, it says Trump is taunting India that it has a dead economy and it might one day have to import its oil from Pakistan. This is how you lose friends and squander influence. I bring up India because during the Obama administration, the strat was simple: get closer to India to use as a proxy against China. The reality is, India already has tensions with China, and a stronger India naturally works against China's interests. And in an ideal world for the US, partnering with India means building an Asia-Pacific trade network that could push China out of the picture and even shift factories from China to India. But here's the problem. Launching verbal attacks and tariff wars against India doesn't pull them closer, it pushes them away. Another strategy from the Obama administration was to befriend Japan, South Korea, Australia, and India, and basically build an Indo-Pacific circle to box China in. Since this new patch notes though, apparently it's to piss off Japan, piss off South Korea, piss off India, and piss off Australia, and have no plan. And the irony is, every one of these countries already has a serious reason to be frustrated with China. The obvious move would have been, hey, we've got common ground, let's team up. Instead, Trump's just giving them reasons to side with Beijing instead, and make the enemy of an enemy a friend. Like, South Korea literally gave you guys a lifeline for hire and manufacturing jobs, sending workers from Hyundai to help build an EV battery factory and train American workers. And you guys called ICE on them.
So there were 452 illegals apprehended at the Hyundai mega plant construction site yesterday near Savannah. And I was the one that reported the information that I had to ICE.
Like, literally pissing off Korea for no reason. Historically, for many reasons, which I'll talk about in another video, China, Japan, and South Korea all hate each other. But Trump has literally got them doing this. I also want to mention Taiwan, which is also talked about in that article. And it says Trump has slapped 20% tariffs on the world's largest semiconductor hub and accused it of ripping off America. Last week, he denied Taiwan's president Lai Ching-te permission to stop over in New York for the fear of offending China. But it's actually this last line of the paragraph which stood out to me. Trump is capable of bargaining away Taiwan's security to win trade concessions from China. Because now Taiwan has to seriously consider whether or not they can rely on the US coming to their help in the case in which they get invaded by mainland China. And if the government in Taiwan decide that there's no hope to be the sovereign nation that it wishes to become, and that they've been left to fend for themselves, it's very likely that they will have to concede to more of China's demands as a way to avoid an all-out war. And right now, it looks more and more closer to be the case, as Trump has stopped giving weapons aid to Taiwan, and regardless of what might come of this, it makes it very hard for Taiwan to trust the US government again, even after the Trump administration is out of office, as who knows when they might be betrayed again. And it goes the same for all the other countries I mentioned before. I wasn't going to bring up Ukraine for this video, but I think it's worth mentioning that there's a very popular sentiment on Chinese social media right now, in which netizens view Ukraine as a dog that was abandoned by its owner. That owner being America. Look, it just seems really strange that Trump will spend all day bad-mouthing China, but his actions are completely different, literally handing Beijing the key to America's own demise on a silver platter. And if you're watching this from America, which is more than a third of you, this video is pretty grim. I don't really know if there's a solution to stopping the next recession and second China shock, nor can I predict when it will hit, or if it will even happen. The signs point towards it, but at the end of the day, who really knows? I want to end my video with this. I used to be in the debate club in uni, and I would often hear the argument that China is going to collapse at any moment now because they're communist. And when it doesn't happen, they decide that China is actually cheating, something you might have also heard a few American economists say.
If one goes all the way back to 2001, that after it was admitted to the World Trade Organization, China cheated in multiple ways. China continues to subsidize its industries in all kinds of ways. It engages in unfair competition.
Okay, so how about America cheat then as well? And after a bit of back and forth with who I'm debating with, what they always truly mean when they say that China is cheating is that China has a command economy, and it's impossible for a capitalist economy to win when competing against a command economy. And the reason why America can't do that as well is because it would harm the interest of capital. Pretty straightforward stuff. Now, I want to make this very clear before you think I'm some crazy socialist. I believe in a free economy, and if the US really believed in a true free market as well, like actually free, and China was out competing, wouldn't the logical move be to study what they're doing and copy it? That would mean central planning, long-term investments, and a strategy that balances between internal growth and global expansion. The Belt and Road Initiative I just mentioned before is a textbook example of that kind of long-term thinking. But unfortunately, that's not what America wants. Instead, it clings to the dollar status as the world's reserve currency, making sure global trade still runs on the dollar, so to keep control, and everyone else shares the burden if something goes wrong. At the same time, the US wants to cut China's manufacturing base out from under them, block their development, and strip away the gains that they've made. Why? Because they beat America at their own game. I just think it's a real shame that those in power would rather reward the greedy than address problems in society. But hey, 300 billion for Israel, because God forbid little Fatima gets to live long enough to celebrate her 9th birthday, right? Oh, and by the way, just to clarify about what I said about China before, China is not a communist state. China is, in their words, a transitional socialist state that is reacting to market forces, global trade, and material conditions that currently exist. Anyway, guys, I'm starting to think boomers might have made the system around themselves. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more apparently CCP shield and somehow CIA-funded propaganda videos as well, as it really helps me out. And finally, if you're eating right now, I hope you're having a wonderful meal. I'll see you next time.